Yeah, one of the things I tell my people is kind of quote, every interaction matters. I think if you think about that before anything you do, like I'm going to networking, I have a meeting with the CEO, I have a meeting with the customer. Be prepared, be grounded in what you're trying to do.
GovCon has a language of its own. Acronyms, compliance, contracting. When you're new, it can feel a little bit like alphabet soup.
And let's be real, no one hands you a decoder ring. We're your hosts, Ziadeh and Camille Tuutti, and we're here to get real about how people actually break in, level up, and lead in government contracting.
Because not everyone grows up dreaming about government contracts. Some people start in finance, crunching numbers, not chasing capture plans.
Today's guest made a hard left turn out of spreadsheets and into business development. Zero experience, full send.
Along the way, he reversed a journal entry, drew out the books for an entire business unit, and lived to tell the tale, character building stuff.
Yep, and now he's leading growth at a major company, talking strategy, mentorship, and why every interaction matters, even the awkward networking ones.
Let's get into it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rookies to Rockstars, a sharp series where we ask bold, smart people one question. What do you know now that you wish someone had told you at the start?
Our guest today is John Hart, Executive Vice President and Chief Growth Officer at Agile Defense. John, we're so glad to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. I'm excited for the conversation.
So let's rewind a little bit. You joined Agile Defense about a year and a half ago, but you've spent your career building business development and capture strategies for some of the biggest system integrators out there. So when you think back on the beginning, what's that one piece of advice you wish someone had given you on day one?
Yeah, I think it's flexibility. I think in this business, things change daily. And really just thinking about that as you engage in different issue resolution or strategies or things like that, just keeping your mind open, being flexible. That's something that's definitely evolved with me significantly from kind of the beginning to where I am now.
That makes sense. And I think we all know that kind of the early phase of your career can feel like drinking from a fire hose. Was there a moment when things got tough or overwhelming, and what mindset helped you push through that?
The early part of my career, I worked in finance. So that was, very different than growth. I think it was, hey, the numbers aren't right or things aren't going your way. It's really just being factual, taking things step by step, not letting the moment get in front of you. And I think that's really, translated to helping, keeping me calm in difficult situations, things like that as my career has evolved.
So you started in finance. How did you kind of bring that knowledge into what you do today? Like, were there big differences? Was there a transition period or a learning curve?
I transitioned into kind of the growth area as a price to win person. So that was kind of a logical move into the growth area. It leveraged, a lot of my background. And then really just like got opportunity. People are like, do you want to be a capture director? Sure, I've never done that before. Let's do it. So a lot of it was really just taking opportunities that came to me to help. And then that just built competency, working with the teams, understanding how capture worked, evolving that into business development and leadership. So really everything was kind of a stepping stone for me, and just really building that into the toolbox and being able to leverage that as my career, evolved into leadership and strategy and all those different things.
Let's talk about risk for a second. It's easy to play it safe early in your career, but at some point, we all have to bet on something. What's that one risk you ended up taking that changed everything for you? Was it saying goodbye to the finance career and starting something new, or was it something else?
Yeah, I think that evolution from finance into growth was probably a big risk at some level. I had a really good mentor who had worked in finance and evolved his career into actually operations. So a little bit different path, but he kind of gave me the confidence to kind of move into something new, bet on myself, and that really changed kind of the trajectory of my whole career. So I think that was probably the biggest risk I took, and I think it's paid off pretty well as far as how things have evolved.
And John, were you naturally drawn to GovCon?
That's a good question. After college, I moved to Virginia and just started working for a small business, actually, originally and then moved into a large business. There was actually a commercial business with a GovCon piece. So I actually got pieces working in GovCon and commercial, but got married. I was in, Northern Virginia and all that. So it just kind of stuck that way. But I did work in commercial. I worked in state and local a little and enjoyed that as well. But kind of if you're in this area, that's where
Mhm.
you end up planting the flag and evolving everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's common in the DMV, but thought I'd ask. So continuing on, we also know that some lessons are, only stick after you've gotten something wrong and unfortunately have to learn it the hard way. So was there a mistake that you made in order to learn what you really needed to know?
I guess it was a mistake, but as I moved into the business development and really working with individual people, maybe I trusted people too much in the beginning and I needed the trust but verify factor to play into that. So, in the beginning, I think things didn't go the way I wanted. And I look backwards and I'm like, well, I really needed to be more diligent in
Mm.
the conversation, hold more accountability to a capture milestone or a process. So, I think that I've learned that lesson a lot of times, but it was especially acute as I tried to transition into kind of capture and then growth leadership.
I actually have a follow up to an earlier question. So, Amanda and I talked with a guest previously who had gone from being a top litigator. He was working at a top litigator firm and he was offered an opportunity to do something completely different. And it sounds similar to you going from finance into what you do today. So, did you have a moment of imposter syndrome? Did you ever think that you weren't going to be able to do the job? Or what was your thought process like? Or did you immediately say yes? Because that happens too without thinking.
Yeah, it wasn't immediate. This was a conversation I had with this mentor over a couple of years. I think when you work in big organizations, you can hit glass ceilings because you're in this huge organization. And so I had become a little bit like a lateral, I guess, in what I was doing. Definitely, some trepidation as I did that first price to win or the first capture, all those things. But I think one thing that grounds me is if I get an opportunity, I'm going to be confident in the basic things I bring, which is strong communication, leadership, focus on, quality, things like that. So I think if you do like the little things right, you can work through those. I think when I got into leadership at first, I was like, well, I've never been a BD executive. I've never, done that. Now I'm leading these people, I'm orchestrating these people. So I did have some moments where, maybe I wasn't as confident as I wanted to be. But again, I went and talked to one of my mentors and worked through that. And so I don't know if I felt like an imposter, but I think you can be a little less confident than you want to be at times. And I was able to work through that, but that's a great question.
So let's fast forward to now. You're in a senior leadership role with a wide lens on growth and strategy. How has your definition of success evolved since you started out?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're younger, you need that immediate success, kind of almost the gratification. I think as I've grown more senior and gotten into more senior positions, you understand that that can't happen every day, every week, every month. And you need to be committed to your strategy and the execution of that strategy, even if there's some bumps in the road. So that can cause stress with people in your organization, things like that. But I think staying committed to, what the senior leadership team has decided, where we want to take the business and that strategy is really important. And understanding there's going to be some bumps in the roads and turns you took that you didn't think, or detours or whatever you call them. So but I think, you gotta go down the path and figure out if it's the one you stay on, or do you need to take a different approach later? But that's probably the biggest thing.
And kind of I have a few questions for you in terms of some words of advice and notes for the next generation of GovCon executives. What are some unexpected character traits that you would say are helpful for roles like, in capture and growth and BD that you've learned throughout the years have really come in handy?
Yeah, I call it like self-propelled. I mean, when you think about like a capture manager, they really need to get up every day and be willing to move that ball forward and really drive that themselves a lot of times. There's expectations that you're moving, the project forward, the capture, things like that. So, you really need somebody that's self-motivated because that's a very autonomous role at some level. So that's one of the things I really look for when I try and find really anybody in my organization, but it's more acute in kind of that capture lead or, growth lead position where they really just need to be self-motivated to move us forward.
And is there anything that you think the next generation needs to unlearn if they want to lead well?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was talking about like hybrid, remote, in office. I think people need to be flexible to the right situation. I don't
Mhm.
think we're expecting people to necessarily go to the office every day, but having a willingness to do that, understand the importance of that physical interaction with people that can be different than Teams or Zoom or whatever. So I've seen some people that don't want to be as flexible with that. Like, I don't want to travel. And I think in GovCon, you need to have some flexibility in that because things evolve and you need to be able to evolve with kind of that scenery.
So you are in the DC area. One thing that young professionals or in the DC area, when I think about BD, I think about all the salespeople out there networking, rubbing elbows, bars, networking events, whatever. Do you have any advice around that for young professionals coming up, especially if they're not used to the networking scene? Like, how can they actually make connections and, like you said, be flexible and meet people where they are, if it's out at an event or wherever?
Yeah, one of the things I tell my people is kind of quote, every interaction matters. I think if you think about that before anything you do, like I'm going to networking, I have a meeting with the CEO, I have a meeting with the customer, be prepared, be grounded in what you're trying to do, and just think about like, this is the first impression I'm making on somebody, whether it's at a networking event or a conference, whether you're at a bar, whether you're in a meeting room, because people are taking that input and making a assessment of you, your company, whether you can help them solve their mission issue or partner with them. So I think just thinking about every interaction matters is really important. And if people think that way, they're going to be more prepared, more coherent in what they're trying to say as they go out and network and engage.
This is an interesting conversation because I think a lot about how college grads today are kind of entering a world where remote work is the norm, but we shifted into it professionally, but they're just entering it and expecting that that's, like you had mentioned, John, like that's a given. And I think there might also be, like Camille was saying, a little bit of fear in networking and having to be in highly social situations and talk to people. And I haven't been in college in a while, but I'm curious as to if you have any tips and if college students who are interested in BD and this world, what they should be doing in college to prepare themselves for that social aspect that could perhaps get them used to being around people so much.
That's a great question, and it's a tough one. I've got a just completed sophomore in college, and she and I talk about that a lot.
Hmm.
Like, one of the things I told her is like, you should go out on LinkedIn and get your presence out there. So if people are going to meet you, they can have some idea of where you're coming from. So I really encourage that, with anybody, because even if you're a college grad, you can look back and, hey, they were in this club or they did this or they did that. So at least you have something you can talk to people about, because that's probably the hardest part, is starting the conversation with people. Even for me sometimes, like, where do we start this and where are we going? I think interacting with people, whether that's a social club, whatever, just making sure you're not, your whole life isn't on text or whatever that medium is, it's really comfortable for you. Even though I think back to college, I'm like, I don't even know how I met somebody out for dinner without a phone because I'm that old. But I think just putting
I think
yourself
all
out there,
three of us are that age. Yeah.
yeah. I was like, I didn't even have email at my first job, so I'm not even sure how we like communicated. But I think just getting yourself out there and being social, when you go to college, like meeting friends is like networking, right? Because you've never met them before. You're trying to find common ground. So it's not that much different, than how you approach those conversations. So that's what I usually tell people, like, hey, think about it like you're trying to meet a new friend. You got to find that common ground, get the rapport, then you can have like the business conversation or whatever you want to have.
I want to go back to the earlier part of your career again. We talked about mistakes, but was there an incident, maybe something mortifying, something that you still are embarrassed about or you cringe about that happened in those early years? Because I think we all have those incidents where we're like, you look back and you're like, oh, God, no. I wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah. It's actually funny. So I guess it was my second job. I was a financial analyst. I was doing the first close that I was doing for that, which is where you close the books for the month. And I put a journal entry in reverse, and it like threw the financials off for like the entire business unit. Everybody's like, what happened? And I'm like, oh my God, I just, I did the debit and the credit backwards, which is a big no-no. So of course, like the rest of my life, I'm uber focused on like double and triple checking and everything and checking your math and all that stuff. But, that was a somewhat of a good lesson because it really kind of woke me up a little about my attention to detail or whatever was going on. So definitely.
Amanda, we have time for one more before I ask the last question.
All right. John, in terms of, help for the next generation, when you're switching jobs throughout your career, I think traditionally we used to think the longer you stay at a company, the more of a foundation we have and the better it looks on our resume. But I think that's changing these days. In my opinion, it looks like people kind of hop around a bit more than usual, an appropriate amount. What do you recommend, or what kind of advice would you have for graduating aspired GovCon executives graduating from college or perhaps looking to transition but not sure if it's the right time or if that's something that'll look good later on? Should it always be an upward motion? Can it be lateral? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I definitely think you need to think about mapping out your career. And, even though I stayed with one company for a long time, everything was kind of mapped out and thought through. And, when I was in finance, I was like, I need to do pricing. I need to do this. I need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it was lateral. Sometimes it was up. I do think you need to be willing to take the lateral, especially if you're trying to change your career. I mean, I think when I went from finance into the price to win, that was a lateral, but it was the only way really for me to effectively do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like just as far as moving around, I think, you always have to assess. I tell people you need to be happy when you're going to work most days, about what you're doing. And if you're not, then it might not be a good situation for you. And most of us are very loyal and want to stick it out. And I think part of that you need to do, because sometimes you just go through a rough patch, but if it's persistent, I think it's healthy to think about going somewhere else. And then, when you're going, making sure it's going to be a place where you can grow. I mean, sometimes it's hard to fully assess that, in an interview cycle, but you need to like the people. You need to feel like fundamentally like it's going to work, and then be prepared to put the work in, because you do have to like reestablish yourself, earn that respect, get your brand out in the new company. So it doesn't just happen. Even when I came here, I didn't expect people to, immediately be like, he's great and all that. You need to go spend the time, meet the people, establish yourself, your brand, so to speak. So I think it's the same thing, whether you're coming out of college or whether you're like, man, I want to go be a CXO or whatever that next move is. It's all kind of the same, and you need to think through it, be pragmatic at some level, but also it's got to feel good, and I would encourage people, it's got to feel right to do it.
It's hard to build your brand and establish yourself if you're in a job for only 6 months or a year. It takes like 6 months or a year to learn a new job.
Absolutely.
And growing. How can you grow in a position or in a company if you don't give it, the chance, if it feels right?
Yep.
So before we go, we have to ask, if we gave you 60 seconds to sell us something, totally unrelated to work, maybe your favorite food or hobby. What's your pitch?
Well, the best college in North America is the University of Florida. It has the most outstanding campus and the greatest sports program. And if you're really into all that, I highly encourage you to hit Gainesville and go Gators.
Awesome. Is that where your daughter is right now?
She's not. She's at Purdue
Oh, no.
University, but you can't get everything you want in life. But I am an avid Gators fan and love that place.
This was a fitting pitch, I
There
think,
we go.
for this conversation. Yeah.
Good. Yep.
Awesome. Well, John, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, your time and your hard-earned perspective. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it. You guys were fun.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. Thanks for listening to Rookies to Rockstars. GovCon doesn't come with a playbook, but these stories might be the next best thing. Follow the show, share it with someone still figuring it out, and connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you.